Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Eddrick Show. I am your host, Eddrick Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, drop us a comment, leave us a like. Let me know how I'm doing as I bring you this interesting content each and every week. I want to welcome to the show award-winning author and musician, Cliff Beach. Cliff is the author of the recently released book, Side Hustle and Flow, which describes his musical journey while he also balanced a day job. It also provides a roadmap to developing your side hustle and offers insights on how you can prepare to be more fulfilled in your life's journey. Cliff is also a talented musician, and his independent EP, Who the Funk is Cliff Beach, was nominated for 3 LA Music Awards. Lastly, he also holds an MBA from Pepperdine University, as well as being a graduate of Berklee College of Music. Cliff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eddrick. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, man. I've been waiting to talk to you about this because it's such an interesting concept in your book. So let's get right into it. Talk to me about the book, Side Hustle and Flow, and why you decided to write it, and how did it all come about?
Well, it was my pandemic project. So as you know, in 2020, music was totally shut down in Los Angeles, where I'm based. And so quickly, we tried to pivot into doing online music. And I know myself. So anytime I have any kind of downtime, I'd say I need a project. I got to always be focused on what that next goal is, because I think that's where you lose momentum.
Right.
And so I started taking all these free online classes that were available at the time. One of them was a book writing course through Scribe Media. A New York Times bestselling author, Tucker Max, created this, where he has like a group of ghostwriters that will help people like Tiffany Haddish and David Coggins create their books. Or if you want, on the free route, it'll teach you how to create your own book through their kind of method and process. So I did that. Got the rough draft, or what they call the vomit draft, where you throw everything up in 90 days, done. And then from there, the editing process took a lot of rounds of edits to get it eventually to a publisher to get it out. A 2-year process altogether. But I had actually wanted to start writing a book starting around 2014. And I had originally titled the book The Art of Awesome. And I was doing interviews with different people. I interviewed Zig Ziglar's son, Tom Ziglar, and I went to Plano and did that. And then I visited Zappos in Vegas, and I interviewed Jen Lim, who was working in an offshoot of Zappos, delivering happiness. And some of that became the last chapter of the book, when we learned about being mentored from mentors and learning from the best. But essentially, I wanted to figure out why some people's lives were awesome and some people's weren't. And just like your show, when you want to talk with interesting people and intelligent ideas, what happens is that happens through a curation. You can't just assume that like all the pieces fall together.
Right.
So I knew somehow some people figure out how to put those pieces together. And then through there, I thought at that time, I don't feel like I knew enough or felt I was at the point to actually finish the book. So I shelved it. And then 2020, we picked it back up, starting with now calling it From Full to Fulfilled. Again, I was trying to figure out, like, there's people who are busy, and there's busyness, and then there's business, thinking about your business. They're different. And then as we started shaping it, I started thinking about side hustles, and I really figured out that, like, okay, this whole time, 20 years in music, I've worked full time. Now I'm vice president of a company called Beauty Tap, and I've been in that industry, but then outside of that, full time in music. And I call it basically the Hollywood shuffle, but you can do it in any city. But essentially, you got to do a lot to make things happen, make ends meet. And so from there, we figured out, okay, side hustle and flow, playing on the words of the movie Hustle and Flow, where he had kind of like a unorthodox way of getting his dream out there, which, I think those people who are hustlers, those street people, they just know so much about grinding. You look at someone like a Damon John, like, that's important. I think Gary Vaynerchuk, he basically, built up YouTube success and now became a thought leader. He said, I don't have to be the smartest, but nobody will out hustle me. That's true. And so side hustle and flow, it was like, okay, you have to create the dream and then the action steps to get that out there. But it's all about flow. As I get older, it's all about balance, the yin and the yang, how you breathe through all those things. Because there's so many, you have the dream. That's the easy part. It's the difficulties and the dead ends and all that stuff that you have to get through. People think, okay, we'll get over things. You don't actually get over anything. You just get through it. You go through hell, you keep going through. And so the flow is the process, because all these times in life you realize, I need to go back to my breathing. I need to focus on the flow. I'm not breathing and stopping and starting because I'm not continuing that flow. When you look at a river, when it's flowing, it's good. When it stops flowing, that's when it becomes brackish and not
Hmm.
useful. So the flow is just as important as the hustle. Because everyone's like, let's work harder. But if you're not working smarter, working harder on its own never helps anybody. You just become tired. So
Exactly.
make a
Exactly.
plan. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. No, it's very relevant because I know in the business world and even the world I came from, there were folks who valued, oh, I put in 13 hours today and I'm going to do another 14 tomorrow. And it's like, if you got to work that hard, then you're not efficient. And I think what you're
Mm-hmm.
getting at is finding that efficiency. Rivers are efficient. You have to, you can't have a lot of stuff getting in the way and blocking it. So you got to find that efficiency. But to that point, for you, which business do you consider your side hustle? Because you're a talented musician, you're also a businessman. And how did you know to develop that part of it over the years?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Martin Luther King has this quote that says, "You don't need to see the whole staircase, to take one step." When I started out in music 20 years ago, I wanted to be an amazing singer, and then from there, I took piano lessons since I was a kid. So I really wanted to perfect that, and now I'm endorsed by Nord Keyboards. From there, as your dream develops and you gather a team, it will expand your universe much bigger.
Hmm.
So I tell people, God or whatever you subscribe to has a much bigger dream than you just on your own. And so when you tap into the universe, it expanded me from, being a singer and a producer to then being a songwriter to then creating a label and a publishing company. These were all necessities. Like what they don't tell you when you're at Berklee College of Music or anywhere as an artist is that art and commerce come together if you ever want to make money. And what they don't tell you is that whether you see yourself this way or not, you are an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a business of one. And so if you're not thinking in that structure, that's how artists, hand it to somebody else and they end up losing their money. So there's so many things that you don't know. At the same way, I tell people all the time, we focus so much on what I call the pregnancy stage and giving birth to the idea. But that is just the beginning of
Right.
a whole new chapter. That like you can't just have a baby and that's it. You have to now raise this child 18 years to get them to all these different pivots and milestones. And so it's not one thing, it's everything, but you have to do it in bite-sized chunks. They say, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You have to break it down into
Hmm.
incremental changes because you'll overwhelm yourself if you don't do it that way. So then from there, over the years, like even the last 5 years, we saw my music expand into radio. I have a local radio show, 88.5 The SoCal Sound, every Saturday night, 10 p.m. You can hear me for an hour playing the best funk, soul, jazz, R&B, whatever grooves, moves, I will play it. But I hadn't thought anything about doing radio until I happened to be played on that station, chatting with the program director, just talking about playlisting. And they said, hey, do you want to try this? So I say yes to a lot of things the universe will send me, but you have to be prepared. You have to do preparation in advance. I had been curating and thinking about music and playlists for many years before I ever went into radio. So the radio led into podcasting. We've done 50 episodes of interviews with different musicians on music. And then from there, we branched into TV. I did 2 seasons of Josh Gates Tonight on Discovery Channel. Again, I was on a free website. Someone found me, said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I said, "Sure, let's do it." Do I know how to do that? Sure. Did I know? No. In the same way, you look at someone like Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx. She ended up getting an opportunity to take her idea onto Oprah for her favorite thing, and Oprah said, "Well, can you make X amount for this many people?" She said, "Sure." Did she know at the time how to do it? Absolutely not. But you then will start putting the plan in place when you have that big dream. But again, she had worked a year on prototypes and making this thing to solve her own felt need, which then made her a billionaire. So I don't think you can necessarily know exactly where you're going to be, but you have to start. The main thing is that figure out what you want to do, what you're good at, what you can make money from, what people want from you, what fulfills you, what gives you this energy. And then eventually from there, the pieces will start to fit. And in hindsight, you'll learn and adapt and grow. But the main thing is starting because on that journey, making those steps, the staircase becomes clearer as you start to get on it. But if you never get on it, you never start climbing that ladder, then you're like way behind other people that are doing that self work.
Exactly. One of the points you make in the book is that it's so much easier now to develop a side hustle than say it was a few years back. So maybe you can expand on a little bit. And why do you think it's so much easier now to start a side hustle than say 10, 15 years ago?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think, coming from being in America, you live in a country where people take for granted that you can wake up and say, I'm a business. You don't have to do anything or find paperwork. I just am. I can, do you want my service? I can teach you this. Do you want to pay me for it? Yes. Say you're good. I'm making
Hmm.
this thing. Do you want to buy that? So that's great. That's the first thing. The second thing is like, yeah, there's a lot of different apps and websites. I mean, you look at something like Airbnb, they were an air mattress cooking for people staying, on their floor. And now it's $1 billion app. So did that happen overnight? No. But the idea and the concept, let's try something we can do in business was called an MVP, a minimum viable product, to get it out there, to gain the feedback. Because at the end of the day, with marketing, you make this dog food, the dog won't eat it. It doesn't matter. You've wasted so much time. So many people have spent so much effort on things. They're like, yeah, this isn't a business. This is a hobby or whatever. And again, I talk about side hustles. They don't have to always make money. I met a person who said, I love to salsa dance. I said, if you know what you love to do, you should be doing it as much as you can afford to, as much as humanly possible. Because some
Hmm.
people don't even know what that thing is. But the thing is that there is no life 101 in education in school. School and life doesn't naturally teach you to think about those things. Like there are other countries that are focusing on that. You look at like the country of Japan, they talk about a theory called ikigai, where you figure out what life the reason for living is and you do that. We even know at hospice that people who have some type of purpose, even just waking up and watering a plant daily, gives them a longer lifespan because they woke up with something to do. Someone was
Hmm.
depending on them. There was an accountability there. They were showing up to something. People don't do well when they don't have a purpose. They did a whole other experiment where they had these people digging ditches, never told them the reason. And every day they kept raising the wage, the minimum wage. They're like, we'll pay you $5 more, $5 more. And every day they saw a steep decline of the same people coming back because at the end of the day, people psychologically need something intrinsic to motivate them to want to show up. And that's what you need to be able to make the sacrifices daily. I tell people all the time when you talk about perseverance and grit, the reason you can create these side hustles is because you have a compelling why at Simon Sinek says. If you don't have that, then you're not going to want to show up and do that. So it's the point where you don't want to do it anymore and it's difficult and you keep going. That's true perseverance.
Hmm.
Everybody can do the first mile. It's that second mile that proves who you are and the character of the person. But I think you have a very democratized society where there's no reason not to do it because there are so many free or low cost apps and the internet and things like Zoom, things that allow you to be independent of geographic location, to be able to connect with people and to put a service out there. So I say try as many things, and then from there figure out from there refine.
Fear is one of the biggest obstacles that people who want to develop, something they feel passionate about, they don't do it because they're scared, or they think, somebody might judge me or whatever. But fear seems to be one of the biggest challenges for folks. So, what are some of the ways that people can overcome their fear and develop that courage that they need to follow their dream?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And fear, I think, stops most people. When I started doing Toastmasters and public speaking, people's number one fear is public speaking, even more than death.
Hmm.
So at a funeral, people would rather be dead in the casket than to give the eulogy, which is crazy, but it's true. And so what happens, I found over time, and I read this book by Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which really pushed me to realize that you have to accept that fear will always be there. But as you start to do something, the closer you move towards that big, hairy, scary thing, the less scary it becomes. Because as you get to it, it's usually not what you thought. Most of the things that we fear can either be irrational or only in our mind. They never actually
Right.
materialize. And so
Exactly.
you just have to be aware of that. But I think people have this misconception that, oh, the people who do this are fearless. That's impossible. There's very few people, unless they have some type of you know defect really where they have just a gene where they don't have fear is like a natural response, and so you just have to accept that it's there, but then it starts to dissipate as you start to move forward. And the thing is, like when I started writing the book in the scribe media course, they say, well, people are afraid. They say, what if I don't have anything interesting to say or new ideas? And they say, you just don't. Nobody is saying anything new. Like everything is tried and true. When you talk about time management, setting goals, like those things haven't changed in hundreds of years. Now, it filters through you, and that makes it unique, and that makes it different. And everybody has their DNA and that X factor, and that will come through in your personality that only you can do. But in terms of it being like super novel, I'm very rare, very rare. And so when you let that go, it allows you to be free. That it does
Exactly.
the fear doesn't matter. It's more importantly of showing up and doing the work. Because the thing is, you may put it out there, you may be criticized, and you know that's going to happen. But the thing is, they don't make statues for critics. At the end of the
Right.
day, if you want to be remembered or revered, you got to put something out there, and you have to just accept that the world will let it do what it does. But for what I've understood, is that 99% of people are good and 99% of people are rooting for you to succeed to some level. Like there's not a lot of trolls out there. There's some, but there's not as many as you would think. It's really still better to get it out there. An idea that's only in your head or what I call hard drive records that nobody will ever hear won't do any good. You
Right.
got to get it out. You
Right.
got to get it out. You got to pull that idea out of your head, put it in front of your face so someone else can see it. Picasso said, it's not about what I see, it's about what I can make you see. And you can't
Hmm.
get to that point unless you have a actual tangible medium out there.
Hmm. They don't build statues for critics. I like that. I'm gonna steal that one. Uh, let me move on now to talk to you about music because it's such a big part of who you are, your personality, who you are as a human being. When did you discover your talent as a musician? And how has music sustained you during the ups and downs, which you candidly share in the book? You share some of your ups and you share some of your downs too. So how has music been that driving force with you all these years?
Well, music, I feel there's a Michael Jackson song called Music and Me. I feel like since childhood, it's always been a part of my life. My family has a lot of amazing vocalists in it. And I grew up in church and the gospel idiom. And so, the call and response and the jubilation and joy that you get. And I always wanted to, I come from a family of mostly ministers. I'm not a minister, so I tell people I'd rather be on the stage than on the pulpit. But I see a lot of similarities in the way you're able to get a message across from there, when you talk about the books and ups and downs, I think most people learn from your struggles way more than your success. If you just write a book or tell people just all success, that's what we see on social media. It's just this one snapshot that
Right.
everything's great all the time. That's
Good
not a
point.
real
Great
life,
point.
It's not a real life. And so we learn from all those opportunities and experiences. But music, I started taking piano lessons at like 5, went through choirs and stuff through school and through church. But really, when I went to Berkeley, I graduated at 16, went to Berkeley straight away, sight unseen, never been to Boston, very young to be 100% on your own, emancipating yourself and taking on that adult role early. But I really enjoyed the experience of conservatory. If you ever see the movie Whiplash, it wasn't quite like that. J.K. Simmons didn't slap me and tell me if I was rushing, but essentially it was very difficult. A lot of people quit in the first year of Berkeley because it's so hard. A lot of people don't finish, and I finished at 19 with my bachelor's degree. But I really think that was just like the precipice. Like it got me to a point to learn how to think and figure out music, and I'm still figuring it out. It's an experiment, and it's experiential. Tom Edison always talks about, oh, sorry, Albert Einstein always talks about these thought experiences you can do even practicing in your mind to a certain extent, and it lights up your brain and you learn a lot that way. But I think I think school education, that's one way to get there. I think there's other ways and other paths. I think we should all be lifelong learners. But in terms of music, listening to music, I've always loved it. I still consume, hours and hours and hours on Spotify, streaming music. I do miss actually going physically to stores. I remember those days of looking through vinyl or looking through CDs and really knowing the in and outs of like a Motown record, like who played on it. Okay, who are the
Right.
Funk Brothers? Who are the Wrecking Crew? Those things are important. Who are the songwriters? But I think everyone that I encourage mentoring wise, I say, if you like a certain artist, go back as long as you can the last 100 years to all their influences and their influences, because that's really how you learn the history. Again, that nothing is new under the sun, but we can put it together in different ways. We can have fusions, bringing stuff together. I did a whole episode on the radio of what's called country funk. Had never heard that country and funk had merged and had a baby. They had some Dolly Parton and some other people, but the Delta, it's like a tree. American roots
Mm-hmm.
have all branches,
Mm-hmm.
but blues
Mm-hmm.
and jazz and funk and soul and R&B and early rock, who people forget was a black medium at some point. Or you
Right.
look at instruments like the banjo, African instrument, people forget those things. So you have to be constantly reminded of the history and where you come from, because If you don't learn from history, then you're doomed to repeat the same things. And so we see we've come so far in some ways, and other ways we regress. So we're just trying to become better people. But in my mind right now, with the side hustle and flow, when we get to that flow portion, when it comes to music, and really how I learned from Herbie Hancock and a lot of musicians that study Buddhism, even though I'm Christian, basically you focus so much in life on the doing, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to now also focus on the being,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of happen together. In the same way with music, I tell people it's like it's not about just the notes you play; it's about the notes you don't play. The rest and the silence is just as important, and you have to again be focusing on that balance. That's what is harmony. That's what music really is underpinned by.
I think Thelonious Monk talked about that, the music between the notes. That was
Mm-hmm.
really something that he, unlike anybody else, the way he used sound between his notes was just genius. And and even Prince talked about that. I'm a huge Prince fan, and he talked
Mm-hmm.
about the silence between the notes and how that can affect the mood and the feeling and just the creativity that you're talking about. So it seems like a lot of the great artists over the years are in tune with that, which is I'm not just up here playing notes. I'm actually giving you a feeling and giving you a sense of my spirit in how I play.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Let's talk now about you had a chance to audition during the early phase of American Idol, and you talk about that in the book. But maybe you can share what that experience was like, and what lessons did you take away from that experience of auditioning for American Idol?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very long time ago. My first year of moving to LA, waiting 3 days outside the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, almost freezing. It's high desert, so it gets very cold at night. I think I was huddled next to a friend from Berkeley who I happened to meet in this long, long line for warmth. And yeah, it's crazy, but I love that I had the hunger and just the optimism to do something like that because I feel like 20 years later I would not, I would not do that. At the same time, though, I went through multiple rounds, which they don't show you to get onto TV, and then eventually, when I get to the actual, Hollywood moment, which is curated. And they already tell you, like, we're not picking who's the best, we're picking like, who's best for TV, and there is a difference. So you have to have a mind when you think about Hollywood, like the first time I actually went there, like what you see the glitz and glam and the red carpet, it's actually just like a crack heroin den, essentially. Like when you look at it, it's real grimy and it's not, what the movie is painted to be. So that's the first thing. I think, but being judged, like I said, there's no statues to critics, so they didn't pick me, and I was very devastated. I mean, I felt like all my dreams were dashed, and it was never going to happen for me. But then I realized very quickly that I pivoted and said, first of all, you can't let anybody dictate who you are and who
Right.
you're going to become. You are the master of your own ship and the captain of your own fate. They can't take it from you, but you can most certainly give it away, and that happens all the time. And so you have to know who you are. And then from there, you have to also realize that like life has many opportunities and many paths. And so American Idol was one path, but you see people who didn't win, like Jennifer Hudson, who created a whole different path. And
Exactly.
so it's not like if this doesn't happen, I think a lot of times in life we have this all or nothing or perfection mentality. It's like even with side hustle and flow, like there are people who are like, well, if you don't do music full time, you're not really a musician. It's like, well, that's not true. That's their limited mindset and view. And I learned that through the years as I wrote after that more music, getting to my hit single "Confident" has almost 1 million streams. I thought it was a cheesy idea, but basically in the song, I say I'm not going to shrink to fit your narrow point of view. I want expanded universe. We learned that when we talk about fixed versus growth mindset. Like you can adopt a growth mindset. You can learn optimism. You can have a much bigger universe. But many people work in a very narrow, constrained, confined view of success and
Hmm.
what that means. And so, for many people, I learned from Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. A friend of mine interviewed them for his podcast, a guy from IK Media. His name's Derek Floyd. And he basically asked them, how do you, become so hot for so long? And they said, we never focus on being hot. We always wanted to be a slow boil. That's a consistency that we can keep
Hmm.
and longevity. And that's what I focus on. You look at someone like a Stevie Wonder, like they had hits, but it's like, when you want to be consistent, like there's like a level. There's one hit wonders. You can go boom and then it's over. Or you
Hmm.
can be like, hey, let's just keep that slow boil rapidly going, over time. So I think that's the way to go. It's like define your own version of success, and then you become better than who you were yesterday. That's all you have to do.
You talked about Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam and others, and I want to talk to you now about funk music because we all grew up with it, from James Brown to George Clinton, and it seemed like funk went from 17 brothers on stage down to 8 brothers on stage down, and then you had Prince who's up there by himself, the one man funk machine. So where is funk now, in your view, especially since you are a practitioner and you know it and you love it? Where's funk music in comparison with all the other types of music out there right now? Where do you see it?
Well, I think funk is, in a way, disco is part of that. Like, I remember there was a huge backlash of disco, like 1979. There's only one disco Grammy given to I Will Survive, but disco didn't. But it folded into like other music throughout the 80s. The Bee Gees started doing stuff for Dionne Warwick and Barbra Streisand, etc. And then eventually, disco came back totally with Daft Punk and
Right.
Pharrell and now Roger.
Right.
It never really dies. It just kind of morphs and changes. And so I think funk, because it's so accessible and such party music, like it never went away. It may have resurgences and other stuff. You look at like Uptown Funk, people were ready for that.
Right.
It was like, oh, Mark Ronson, they had already done it with Valerie and other stuff. They proved that the new and the old school can have this boomerang effect where you get the parents, the grandparents, you get the new kids, you get the old kids, everybody, because good music will always prevail. That's the first thing that people have to remember. It's like there's always like auto tune and other stuff, but in the end, people will always eventually gravitate back to an Amy Winehouse, for instance, because
Right.
that stuff is tried and true. You listen to Motown for hundreds of years while you're in the old folks' home. Will you listen to Britney Spears and the old folks? I hope not. I hope not. So but I think there's a lot of new funk pioneers. There's a lot of great hybrid brands. A lot of bands are coming from outside the U.S. too. So I think Europe, Australia, New Zealand, even in Asia, I think there's different people. So you have groups like Krongaben doing Thai funk. What was it? We didn't know. Now we know. And they've had huge success. Leon Bridges, who they work with, has done some stuff. And I listen to Hiatus Coyote and Moonchild, lots of people who mix jazz and funk and other styles. But I think ultimately, yeah, it did become expensive to have those big bands for sure. Sometimes you had more people on the stage than you had in the audience. That was
Right.
the P-Funk. That was
Right.
the P-Funk effect. But I think it was interesting because James Brown and George Clinton and Bootsy and those people, and that's great. I love how they're passing the torch. You have a group like Silk Sonic, Anderson .Paak, and Bruno Mars who have absorbed that style, but working with Bootsy to show like that they have respect and homage for the classics. And again, like I said, I think even people like Corey Henry. There's so many great groups
Genius.
that
Just a
that are
just a
able.
genius. Corey Henry is the man. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's been like that since he was a kid. You see videos on the
Right.
organ, and so I think even last night, I was in Hollywood and I went to this one place and saw a couple bands, and then just stumbled into another place that happened to have a band, a friend of a friend who I didn't even know was going to be playing. And there's just so much talent. There's so much talent out there, and not everything is going to be recognized, and everything is going to be awarded, but it's out there. And on Spotify, I mean, they're releasing hundreds of thousands of songs a week. And
Mm-hmm.
so those playlists and stuff are great to be able to discover. But I think just pull that childlike wonderment and creativity that gets beaten out of us, I think through school and beyond, forward, where when you're in that discovery phase, when you're open to always learning about new artists and new bands, knowing that we can respect the old while embracing the new, then the world is a bigger tapestry and much more exciting. So funk is here to stay in many permutations, but there's always going to be something that moves and grooves for sure.
Absolutely. Like I was telling you before we started, I love music. I love all kinds of music. Just fortunate in the time period I grew up in. You mentioned some of the funk groups in the mid 80s that came from England, Howard Jones and all those cats that was doing funk music. So it's definitely a genre that's a standard. I mean, it truly is a standard, just right up there with jazz and all the other types of music you can think of. So I appreciate your affinity for funk because I think it's such a driving force in our culture, and most people probably aren't even aware of how influential funk music is on popular culture today. So
Definitely.
go ahead. I was going to say something else.
No, I said definitely, yeah, and I like the idea. So basically, with James Brown, what they did is they took what was called a vamp, where you
Hmm.
would just kind of have it as a transition, and they made that the full thing. And they're like, oh, we're just gonna jam on the one. And as you look at Bootsy, it's like they expand the definition of like what is the one. That could be the source, that could be the universe, that could be this vibration. That's the other thing that I've realized now as I get older, as I went to Joshua Tree and I was up in Ojai and I meditate and I realized like nature is humming. There's
Yeah.
like a buzz and
Hmm.
the vibration in different places. And when you become attuned to that, when you're playing with other musicians and everybody is tuning to, that's just tuning the instruments, but tuning to the vibrations of each other, you get those peaks and moments of synergy and symbiosis. Like, and I think funk is a great medium for that in the way that jazz is, because there's so much improvisation, so much listening to each other. And when you think about those groups, like even if you have a James Brown or George Clinton as a focal point, it's the Bootsy Collins and the Catfish Collins and the Bernie Worrells and all those other people and the Fred Westleys and the Maceo Parkers. It's all of them together. They're cooking, what King Curtis said, a Memphis soul stew. It's all mixed together and they mix it through the Delta and beyond. So I'm always excited when I go to New Orleans or New York or anywhere. I mean, there's so many people that you can learn from, and even if you don't play music, just to appreciate. Like you got to get out there and support live music, support new music, stream new music, whatever you have to do to, people, they need you more than they think. And it matters. That one click matters more than you think.
Exactly. Shout out to Junie Morrison too. Got to give Junie Morrison a big
Oh,
shout
yes.
out. Big shout out. He was right there at the forefront of all of that as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as we get ready to wrap up, let me ask you. So the book is out now. So, but what's next for you, man? What's next for Cliff Beach? What are you working on?
In terms of the book, we're working on some derivatives. We have a mini documentary that's kind of in the festival submissions and distributed submissions right now. So we'll see how that does in the coming months. But that was exciting to give a visual medium to the book. And then we're also working on a video online course as a companion that's currently being edited. So we hope to have that out hopefully before end of year. Again, to just give people different opportunities, realizing that people learn in different facets. The book is out in all the mediums, so hardcover, softcover, Kindle ebook version, and audiobook version, which I narrated myself. So all of those Audible is out there. SideHustleandFlow.net will get you to the book. And then we're working on new music. That's really my core passion and goal. So we just finished up a soul record and we're figuring out distribution for that. And then I'm editing my first jazz record, which still has a lot of soul and R&B elements. So I'm excited to, as you're always constantly working on different projects, I never do the same project twice. And so I'm always trying to not only just evolve, but it keeps it interesting, but also like you have to remain hungry. And to do that, like all growth happens outside of your comfort zone. So I have to
Mm-hmm.
do something that's uncomfortable or I'll
Mm-hmm.
become the same. And then
Mm-hmm.
once I become exactly the same, unfortunately, you can never like trap lightning in a bottle or recreate the exact same thing twice. I can go record the same place with the same people, the same songs, and it won't be the same. So you just have to like move forward. Life is always progressing forward. Like you think, maybe you could do other stuff, but you don't. It's like always pushing you forward. You can't go back. You gotta burn the boats. You gotta look forward. Can't drive looking in the rearview mirror. Just keep it moving forward.
That forward flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forward flow. Oh, well, Cliff, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and discussing the book. The book is titled Side Hustle and Flow. It is available everywhere. And what was the website again where people can go?
SideHustleandFlow.net. But if you go to Amazon, you'll also find everything there.
Excellent. Excellent. Cliff Beach, thank you so much for being on the Eddrick Show today.
Thank you, Eddrick, man. Anyone who knows Junior Morrison is good with me.
Oh man, you know, I can
Oh yeah, I've met James
we can
Brown.
go
Yeah,
deep in the cuts, man. But yeah, Junie Morrison was bad, brother. If you youngsters out there, Google Junie Morrison, you will not be disappointed. Um, let me close this out, man. We could go a whole another half an hour talking about music. Maybe I'll have you back on and we can talk about music in more
excellent.
depth. This has been another edition of the Eddrick Show. I am your host, Eddrick Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Check us out on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. I do want to thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button. This is the place, as I said, intelligent conversation with interesting people. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode.